So, it has been several days since I went to go see M. Night Shyamalan's newest film, Glass, and I've just been sitting here, not doing anything, not making a video, not writing, just trying to organize my thoughts and feelings about what I've just seen. This has been an entirely new experience for me, not the procrastination part because that's just who I am, but regarding M. Night's films, I usually have a pretty clear idea as to how I feel about them because he kind of has two speeds, utterly brilliant and utterly cringe. But Glass is in an entirely different category, at least for me. Now, I'm not here to bash M. Night because the internet has done more than enough of that over the past decade, and I feel like I have very little to add to that conversation, but as I've been thinking about Glass and my feelings about it, I've been reflecting on my relationship with M. Night's work, and it's been interesting. The Sixth Sense was definitely a life-changing film for me, and I feel about it today the same way I felt when I was like 10, that it's a perfect film. I may even do an entirely separate video about why I think it's so great. Then came Unbreakable, which I'll talk about more later as it relates to Glass, but another A-plus film from M. Night. Then there was Signs, a film I actually really love, in spite of the twist being that sometimes things work out for the best. I'm actually totally fine with that. Overall, great movie. Then something happened, and kept happening for the next 11 years. Every film he has made, from The Village to The Visit, I have really disliked, including Devil, which he did not direct, but make no mistake, it is an M. Night film through and through.
Like, how many times have you seen a child fall and barely miss the edge of the table with their head? Like, why is it so rare that they hit it?
Get to your point.
What are you doing? Oh. When he's near, everything goes wrong.
But here's the thing. There is something about his work that makes me react far more emotionally than I do when some other director makes a film that I don't like. And I think it's because he always swings for the fence. Sometimes he even does it blindfolded. It fascinates me to no end that the same man who is responsible for this is also responsible for this.
It makes you kill yourself. Just when you thought there couldn't be any more evil that could be invented.
Why don't you use me for your next event? God.
He's the most interesting man in the world. His films also serve as this great example of the subjectivity of art. Lady in the Water being Exhibit A. From what I've experienced over the years, it seems like you just become one of two people after watching this film. There are people who dislike this film so much that they find it very difficult to understand how someone could even sit through it, let alone like it. And way over here on the opposite end, there are people who are so ride or die for this movie that they cannot even begin to understand the level of hate that it gets. Even though I fall into the first category to the point where this film straight up makes me angry, in a weird way, I've also come to love how much people love it. M. Night's films are unique in that way, that they bring out this polarizing reaction from people, and that's an achievement in and of itself. Following his career for literally 2/3 of my life has been quite the entertaining roller coaster ride, which brings me to Split. This was honestly one of the most fun experiences I've had in a theater in my entire life. As the film's final act was winding down, my initial thoughts were like, wow, that was really good. I'm still not so sure about the whole angle of trauma and mental illness giving you superhuman abilities, because if that were the case, I'd have laser beams coming out of my fucking eyes by now and... Wait, what did that bitch just say?
This is like that crazy guy in the wheelchair that they put away 15 years ago. And they gave him a funny name, too. What was it?
Mr. Glass.
Now, right here, this is the exact moment in which I very publicly lost my goddamn mind. I was jumping up and down in my seat, grabbing my husband's arm and shaking him, and I honestly don't know how well I was able to stifle the oh my gods that were coming out of my mouth for the next 20 minutes. If the movie hadn't just ended, they probably would have asked me to leave. I already liked this film way more than I had liked an M. Night film in over a decade, and the final touch of it being in the Unbreakable superhero universe completely fixed the only issue I had, which was having a hard time getting behind the trauma equals powers thing. But in a superhero context, it totally works. And come to find out, Unbreakable was always meant to be the first in a trilogy, so needless to say, I was really excited and was like, wow, is M. Night back? But as excited as I was to see the trailer for Glass, when it came out, a little voice in my head said, now, I know how much you're looking forward to this, but let's pretend like we're going to the Cheesecake Factory and manage our expectations. This could go one of two ways. But for me, Glass went a lot of different ways and broke the mold of my usual black and white experiences with his films. There's a lot to talk about here, so let's just get into it. Well, first of all, let's get the most obvious thing out of the way and talk about James McAvoy's performance. The only aspect of this film that I have seen unanimously praised to no end is McAvoy pulling off this seemingly impossible performance yet again. I really want to stress how good he is in this. And it isn't simply because he's consistent with all of the 20+ characters he has to play and is able to switch between them seamlessly, or even that he's able to do this magic trick of being able to go over the top without being over the top. It's the finer details of his performance that really fascinate and impress me. In both Split and Glass, he's so meticulous in every aspect of his facial expressions and body language that while you're watching it, there are moments where his face and posture changes ever so slightly, and you already know what character he is before he even opens his mouth. There's a part in Split where it's revealed that one of his personalities has been pretending to be another one of his personalities, and he pulls this off so seamlessly. It's perfect. Do you guys understand what a special boy we have been given? What has been asked of him in this part is something that very few actors would be able to do, and you can just tell that he's just as in love with and dedicated to this role in Glass as he is in Split. And that alone is worth going and seeing this, in my opinion. Despite the issues I have with this film, which I will get into in a little bit, I just don't want anyone to miss out on him here, because what he does here is really something to see. Everyone else's acting is fine and consistent with their characters from the previous films. I mean, Bruce Willis does seem a little sleepy, but, you know, nap time gets a lot more frequent and more valuable as we get older. And, you know, sleepy people, they don't know they're sleepy. They're just walking around like regular people. But yeah, anyway, everybody's acting is pretty good, including Spencer Treat Clark, who is still, thankfully, a really good actor, and I'm so glad they got him back to reprise his role as Joseph. I really enjoyed the scenes between him and Bruce Willis early in the film, and I think it's very fitting that David's son has essentially become his oracle, since a large part of David Dunn's character development in Unbreakable had to do with his son's unwavering belief in his abilities. I enjoyed a majority of the cinematography as well. He shot this film in a multitude of different ways, and it never really felt messy to me. Everything felt pretty cohesive, and the eclectic shots certainly kept things interesting visually, considering the massive amount of dialogue this film has. Now, at this point, I can't really thoroughly get into what I didn't like about this film without completely spoiling it, because most of my issues have to do with its third act. As far as if you're on the fence as to whether to go see it or not, I would definitely say watch it, especially if you've been invested in these characters for the last 19 years. There's no reason not to see how it ends. Even though many people, including myself, have major issues with the execution of its ending, just like I expected in true M. Night fashion, it's the type of ending that is very polarizing, and there are also many people that absolutely love it. So it is possible that you might fall into the latter category of people who enjoy the film from beginning to end. So before I go into spoilers, please stop watching this video, because I would hate to ruin it for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. So go see this film for yourself if you haven't already, and I will rate it a just go see it anyway out of 10. Okay, last spoiler warning, and okay, so I was pretty much on board with this film for the entirety of its first 2 acts. The first half hour of this movie is so well paced, I was kind of shocked. I really wasn't sure how I felt about its trailer, so when this film got off to the start that it did, I was kind of relieved that I was enjoying it so much. I was so immersed that I was even able to let go of the fact that the Horde wouldn't just close its eyes at the personality changing lights. I was like, oh, well, maybe they're so bright that closing your eyes doesn't work or something. I don't know, whatever. This is pretty good so far. Moving on. That whole scene when Dr. Staple is trying to convince the three main characters that they're crazy is pretty convincing, and I like that some of the characters begin to doubt themselves because of it. But looking back, I feel like that scene could have greatly benefited from Elijah actually having been able to speak. And I totally understand that at this point in the film, he's faking being catatonic so he can get away with all this shit when nobody's paying attention to him. But you have this doctor character who's presented as being highly intelligent and perceptive, and I feel like it's such a missed opportunity not to have these two go at it in a debate. We also never get a private conversation between David and Elijah. After all that, there's so much history between these two characters, and they literally don't have a single exchange in the entire film. Their relationship is just as important as Kevin and Casey's, but for some reason, one is prioritized over the other in this film. In fact, David's relationship with Kevin/the Horde is given far more attention than his relationship with Elijah, which is a little weird, but I suppose none of that matters anyway, since they're all very unceremoniously killed at the end. Let me back up a little bit. At the time that I was watching this, the point where I really started to have issues with the film is in its third act. I feel like the good portion of the film was punctuated by Elijah slitting that orderly's throat, and then things just kind of start to fall apart from there. I know that Elijah is a super genius, and it is more than plausible that he would secretly be pulling the strings in this facility, but the way that they go about this aspect of the story is just so strange. The contrast between the amount of thought put into the mechanisms put in place to suppress these characters' powers within their cells, and then the lack of staff and security in the rest of the facility is like unbelievable. Almost nobody works here. I get that Elijah removed a vital part of that lobotomy machine before they performed the procedure on him so it wouldn't work, but I just don't understand why the doctors thought that it did. Wouldn't they know that a literal surgery just didn't happen? It would have made sense if the machine just wouldn't turn on and they were like, oh, we can't do it right now, instead of just being like, well, the machine turned on, I'm satisfied, we won't check his brain or anything. It all feels very rushed, as does every other reveal that happens for the rest of the film. Except for, I guess, the part where the Horde finds out that Elijah killed his dad because he was on the same train as David, because they kind of set that up really well in Split, so that's fine, but everything else is like, oh my goodness. So it turns out that Dr. Staple and all of the soldiers that show up during the final showdown are all part of a secret organization designed to either suppress or exterminate people with supernatural abilities, which would have been fine if they would have planted seeds of that being the case throughout the film, but they don't, and it feels really unearned. The way that they start to reveal it is also super weird. As David is being murdered in that mud puddle, Dr. Staple takes his hand and his I see a bad thing people did power kicks in, and he just sees her in a restaurant with seemingly important people. I hope that the film didn't expect me to start figuring out the twist at this point, because I was just like, what's going on? Like what is her sin? Is she one of those people that goes into restaurants right before they close? Because that's pretty bad, I guess. Does she not tip? Did they all ask for separate tabs? What is happening? But right after that, she explains the secret organization thing to him, and he dies. They all die. Just as Kevin finally takes control of his body, they shoot him, and Elijah dies from his beast finding out that I killed his dad wounds. But of course, his plan was not to stage a scene at the city's tallest building to reveal Kevin and David's powers to the world like he tells everyone earlier, but a suicide mission to get the security camera footage from outside the facility out to everyone in spite of the secret organization trying to cover it up. So it's like the same plan, but slightly different, I guess. He arranges the footage to be emailed to the remaining main characters so they can reveal it to the world, and the film ends with Casey, Elijah's mom, and Joseph all at a train station watching people as they react to the news that superpowers are real, and then it zooms out with super inspirational music playing. The way this was handled felt very off to me, and I'll tell you why. The hopeful tone feels very inappropriate, considering this is brought about by a terrorist. Elijah has murdered hundreds, if not thousands of people to get to this point, and it's as if the tone of this film is saying it was all worth it. Not to mention the beast brutally murdering several innocent people with his bare hands. I mean, at least we can kind of get behind the fact that Kevin is innocent of the crimes, considering he didn't even know that they were happening in Split, and some of the other personalities kind of start to show remorse for what they've done towards the end of Glass, but Elijah is just straight up evil. He's a very complex character that's sympathetic because of the development and groundwork laid out for him in Unbreakable, so I am by no means saying that he's one-dimensional. But unlike Kevin, he's fully aware of his actions and shows no remorse for them whatsoever. I'm not sure if I was supposed to interpret the part where he says, "I wasn't a mistake, Mama," as he lays dying as some sort of apology, because I was like, I don't know, dude, you like dead ass slit an orderly's throat like hours ago, and it wasn't even the one who was a dick to you. It was the nice one who would encourage his friends to take better care of themselves by like drinking enough water and taking their vitamins. Like, what the fuck? You have murdered so many innocent people, and I'm just supposed to think it's all been worth it because you blew the lid off of the fact that superpowers are real? Man, fuck you. Now, I am not against moral ambiguity in films. I very much enjoy films that are challenging in that way, but the Unbreakable series has not been morally ambiguous in the slightest up until the last 20 minutes of Glass. That is, if the end of Glass was even meant to be morally ambiguous, which I kind of doubt since it's framed in such an overwhelmingly positive way. At the end of Unbreakable, when it reveals the fact that Elijah is a literal terrorist, it is horrific and heartbreaking. Can we just talk about how great this scene is, by the way? David is sickened and horrified by the things that Elijah has done and breaks down in tears over it. Elijah also begins to cry, not from remorse, but from relief that he's finally found his place in this world. He doesn't regret killing those people in the slightest because the fact that he found David has convinced him that he wasn't a mistake. It's like his favorite thing to say after he murders people, apparently. He is a sympathetic character because we can understand why he's the way that he is, not because we approve of what he's done. The things that he's done are unforgivable. There's a scene in Split that is similar to this in emotional weight and context. The moment that we finally meet Kevin, the real person who's been buried so deep by his evil altars that he doesn't even know what's been happening. He hasn't even been conscious for almost 3 years and isn't even aware that any time has passed, but when he realizes what he's done, or rather what his other personalities have done, he begs Casey to shoot him. It's basically the opposite of what Elijah does. When the weight of his actions hits him, he doesn't see it as justifiable or as a means to an end as his altars do, but the unforgivable, monstrous things that they are. The gruesome murders of innocent people, and he knows that the only solution is for him to be put down like a rabid animal. So, needless to say, this hopeful, it was all worth it in the end tone presented in Glass feels kind of gross to me. I would even go so far as to say it's kind of in poor taste. You present me with these two characters in previous films that have done the unthinkable, and it's like I'm just supposed to forget all of that and just see them as these cool characters who are an inspiration to all. That in death they've all become heroes, and I just can't get behind that. Now, I know that people are going to disagree with me on this, and that's fine. This video is just like my opinion, man. I've seen plenty of people online defending this ending, and I get somebody liking it because that's just what M. Night does. He is a very original filmmaker with a knack for making things that are kind of just love it or hate it. And I still love him, even though he makes me confused and frustrated sometimes. And even though, according to Lady in the Water, he thinks people like me literally deserve to die. You're fucking wild, my dude. I love you. Thanks for watching.